A billionaire mocks a nobody in a luxury pet boutique, then watches in horror as his entire world shatters in seconds. Subscribe to the channel, share the video, and write in the comments what city you were from. The most expensive dog in the city, and the man who changed everything. The scent of fresh espresso and polished leather filled the air of Elite Canine Haven, New York's most exclusive luxury pet boutique. The shop wasn't just a pet store, it was a private showroom, a place where only the wealthiest clientele could purchase the rarest breeds. Glass chandeliers sparkled above a showroom of velvet-lined display cases where diamond-studded leashes and gold-plated feeding bowls sat behind bulletproof glass. Near the entrance, a man stepped inside, his presence immediately causing a shift in the air. He was tall, his movements unhurried, his expression unreadable. His dark jeans and scuffed leather boots clashed against the pristine white marble floors. The worn-out jacket on his shoulders, a stark contrast to the tailored suits and designer dresses surrounding him. That man was Lucas Carter, an actor known for his quiet generosity and humility, but in this room, no one recognized him. A hushed murmur spread through the boutique, followed by disapproving glances from several high-profile customers. One of them, Vincent Devereaux, a billionaire investment mogul, barely hid his distaste as he adjusted the cuff of his $50,000 Patek Philippe watch. He was standing near the boutique's most prized display, a Tibetan Mastiff, a dog worth $2 million, an animal so rare that owning one was considered a symbol of power among the elite. Vincent had been negotiating the purchase for weeks, ensuring that he, and only he, would walk out of Elite Canine Haven with the most expensive dog in the city. So, when Lucas Carter stopped in front of the Mastiff's viewing area, Vincent's eyes narrowed. "Something I can help you with?" Vincent asked, stepping forward, his voice smooth yet laced with condescension. His designer loafers barely made a sound against the polished floor, yet his presence was loud, unavoidable. Lucas kept his hands in his pockets, his expression calm. He observed the dog, which sat regally behind the glass, its thick golden fur glowing under the showroom lights. "Magnificent animal," Lucas said softly. The Tibetan Mastiff locked eyes with him, tail wagging slightly. Vincent let out a sharp chuckle. "He is," he said, pausing for effect, "which is why I'll be taking him home today." He gestured toward the boutique staff, who were standing attentively nearby. "Not exactly the kind of dog just anyone can afford." Lucas turned slightly, meeting Vincent's gaze for the first time. There was no anger, no offense, just quiet amusement. "Dogs don't know price tags," he said simply. Vincent's lips twitched into a smirk. He glanced at Lucas's boots, then his jacket, as if assessing a lowly tradesman who had wandered into the wrong neighborhood. "Oh, I see," Vincent said, nodding as if suddenly understanding. "You're here to look, not buy. Maybe for a Labrador? A nice mutt from the discount section?" He chuckled, turning to an elegantly dressed woman beside him. She laughed too. The boutique grew uncomfortably silent. A staff member shifted uneasily, recognizing the tension but unwilling to intervene. Lucas exhaled, his eyes flickering with something unreadable. Meanwhile, the Tibetan Mastiff was still watching him, ears perked, tail thumping softly against the glass. Vincent tilted his head, studying Lucas as if trying to figure out why he was still standing there. "Listen, I don't mean to be rude," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "But this boutique operates at a certain caliber. You understand, don't you?" Lucas didn't answer. The dog, however, did. With a deep, commanding bark, the Tibetan Mastiff suddenly stood up and charged the glass, pressing its massive paws against it, tail wagging wildly. The boutique gasped. The animal, which had been cold and indifferent toward Vincent for weeks, was reacting with unmistakable excitement toward Lucas. Vincent's face darkened. Lucas raised an eyebrow, his lips curving into a small, knowing smile. A staff member hesitated before stepping forward. Sir, she said, looking nervously at Vincent. The dog doesn't usually react like this to new people. Vincent's jaw tightened. He turned to the boutique's owner, a dignified older man named Reginald Halloway, whose eyes had been locked on the scene from across the room. "Tell him," Vincent demanded, voice clipped. "Tell him this dog is already spoken for." Reginald, however, did not immediately answer. His sharp eyes darted between Vincent and Lucas, lingering on the Mastiff that was still pressed against the glass, practically vibrating with excitement. The contrast was striking. For weeks the dog had ignored Vincent, barely acknowledging his presence. Now it was behaving as if it had found its long-lost companion. Reginald sighed, then spoke carefully. "I believe the choice is not entirely ours," he said. Vincent's face went red. "Are you joking?" Reginald gestured toward the dog. "It seems our guest has made an impression." Vincent clenched his fists. "So what? The dog likes him? That doesn't change the price tag." He turned to Lucas with a sneer. "Do you even know how much this dog costs?" Lucas took a step forward. "Do you?" The boutique fell into dead silence. Vincent scoffed. $2 million. Lucas's smile didn't fade. And yet, it's priceless to the right person. Vincent opened his mouth to reply, but before he could, Lucas did something that made everyone freeze. He casually reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a sleek black platinum card. The Centurion card. Vincent's expression shattered. The boutique owner inhaled sharply. A few of the wealthier patrons gasped outright. No limit, no restrictions, no questions. Lucas placed the card gently on the counter and met Vincent's stunned gaze. "I'll take him." The entire room fell into stunned silence. Even the chandeliers seemed to stop shimmering. Vincent's face went from pale to beet red. He tried to speak, tried to say anything, but nothing came out. The boutique owner turned to Lucas, adjusting his tie. "Would you like the adoption papers prepared now, Mr. Carter?" Lucas nodded. "Please." At that moment, the Tibetan Mastiff let out another joyful bark, as if it already knew. Vincent, humiliated and exposed, took a step back, his jaw clenched so tightly it looked painful. His expensive watch, his Italian suit, none of it meant anything now. The people who had once laughed along with him were now watching Lucas with admiration, respect. Lucas turned back to the dog, kneeling down as the boutique staff unlocked the glass enclosure. The massive animal practically leapt into his arms, choosing him without hesitation. Vincent turned on his heel and stormed toward the exit, his grand departure ruined by the sound of the Mastiff's happy tail-wagging reunion with its new owner. As Lucas scratched the dog behind its ears, he glanced toward Reginald and smirked. I guess he did understand true value after all. The boutique erupted into knowing laughter, but as Lucas walked out, his new companion trotting happily beside him, everyone knew they had just witnessed something more than just a sale. They had witnessed a lesson in what real worth looks like, and Vincent, he had just learned it the hard way. The price of true worth, a lesson in humility. The tension in the exclusive Manhattan luxury showroom was thick enough to cut with a knife. Golden chandeliers bathed the room in an opulent glow, while velvet drapes lined the walls. Wealthy socialites and billionaire investors milled about, sipping champagne as they browsed through the showroom's prized collection, some of the world's rarest and most expensive animals. Keanu Reeves stood in front of a Tibetan Mastiff, the most magnificent dog in the showroom, housed in an enclosure so extravagant it looked like a penthouse suite. The towering beast, worth over $2 million, sat behind a floor-to-ceiling glass panel, its eyes locked onto Keanu with an almost eerie intensity. Across the room, Vincent Devereaux, An investment tycoon watched Keanu with simmering irritation. Vincent wasn't just a regular client, he was the client. He had personally commissioned the most elite breeders to source this particular Tibetan Mastiff, believing that owning the most expensive dog in the city would further elevate his already absurdly inflated status. And now, a man in a weathered leather jacket and faded jeans was standing between him and what he believed was rightfully his. The other clients in the showroom had taken notice. A woman in a silk emerald dress, pretending to browse a selection of diamond-studded collars, tilted her head slightly, clearly eavesdropping. The boutique staff exchanged uneasy glances, sensing the tension but unsure whether to intervene. Keanu stood still, unaffected by the attention. Vincent, adjusting the solid gold cufflinks on his $15,000 tailored suit, smirked and stepped closer, his cologne thick in the air between them. "Listen," Vincent said, lowering his voice but keeping its sharp edge. "I don't mean to be rude, but this isn't a public shelter. These animals are for serious buyers, people who understand their true worth." His gaze flickered to Keanu's worn boots, the corners of his lips curling in condescension. Keanu remained quiet, his eyes never leaving the Mastiff, who, strangely, hadn't acknowledged Vincent's presence at all. "You see," Vincent continued, gesturing dramatically to the glass-enclosed dog, "this isn't just a pet. This is an investment, a symbol of power, a $2 million acquisition." He let out a sharp laugh. "And no offense, but I'm not entirely sure that's within your, budget." The silk-draped woman coughed to hide a nervous chuckle. A silver-haired financier nearby smirked into his champagne glass. The boutique staff, shifting uncomfortably, hesitated, unsure whether to say something. Keanu finally turned his head, locking eyes with Vincent. His expression was unreadable, calm, but with an edge of something deeper, something unshakable. "Sometimes," Keanu said, his voice even and deliberate, "the things that matter most can't be measured in dollars." Vincent's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second before he scoffed. "Right, spoken like someone who's never owned anything worth more than a used car." The showroom air grew thick with quiet anticipation. Vincent waved a hand at a nearby staff member. "James, be a dear and escort this gentleman to the standard adoption section. Maybe he can find himself a nice Labrador." The young staffer, clearly uncomfortable, hesitated. Sir, At that moment, the Tibetan Mastiff made its move. With an unexpected thud, the massive beast launched itself toward the glass, pressing its enormous paws against the panel with such force that several guests gasped in surprise. Its golden eyes blazed with excitement, not at Vincent, but at Keanu. Its tail wagged furiously, something it hadn't done once since arriving at the showroom. The silk-draped woman's mouth fell open. One of the boutique assistants whispered, "I've never seen it react like that." Vincent blinked in stunned disbelief. He took a step toward the glass, clearing his throat. Yes, well, of course, he's excited. He knows his future owner." But the Mastiff ignored him completely. Instead, the massive dog lowered its head and whined softly, still focused entirely on Keanu. Vincent's face darkened. Keanu tilted his head slightly, a faint smile forming. "Looks like he's made up his mind." Vincent's nostrils flared. "Don't be ridiculous," he snapped. "This is $1 million dog, not a stray that follows the first stranger it sees." The boutique owner, Reginald Halloway, an older gentleman who had been observing quietly from behind the counter, finally stepped forward. "Actually," Reginald said, his voice carrying the weight of experience, "I've never seen this particular Mastiff react this way to anyone. Not once." A murmur rippled through the showroom. Vincent's hands clenched into fists. Keanu took a step forward, placing his hand gently against the glass. The Mastiff immediately pressed its nose to the same spot, letting out another low, affectionate whine. The entire boutique fell silent. Reginald nodded slowly. "It seems He glanced at Vincent, then back at Keanu. "It seems our guest has made his choice." Vincent froze, his face twisted in disbelief before turning an ugly shade of red. "Choice?" he repeated, his voice rising. "That's not how this works. I've already negotiated the sale. I was about to sign the contract." Reginald folded his hands in front of him. "And yet, even the finest things in this world have a way of choosing their rightful owner." The boutique guests were enthralled. No one spoke. All eyes were on Vincent, unraveling at the seams. Vincent let out a sharp laugh, turning back to Keanu. "And what exactly are you suggesting? That this man," he practically spat the word, "thinks he's going to adopt a $2 million dog?" Keanu finally turned to Vincent, his eyes steady. "Why not?" The boutique gasped. Vincent's lips curled. "Because, my friend, some of us operate on a different level. Some of us know how to—" Keanu reached into his pocket. Vincent's voice died mid-sentence. Keanu pulled out a sleek, matte black card and casually set it on the counter. The Centurion card. No limit, no restrictions, no questions. The entire showroom froze. Vincent's expression shattered. Reginald's eyes flickered in surprise before he immediately signaled the staff. "Prepare the adoption paperwork for Mr. Reeves." The room exploded into murmurs. Vincent took a step back, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly. Keanu knelt down, pressing his forehead gently to the glass. The Tibetan Mastiff wagged its tail furiously, its entire body vibrating with happiness. It had chosen him, and Vincent, he had just learned the most expensive lesson of his life. The moment that changed everything. The private jet terminal in New York hummed with quiet luxury. Glass walls overlooked the shimmering runway, where a state-of-the-art Gulfstream G800 stood ready for departure. Inside the terminal's exclusive VIP lounge, elite travelers sipped on $2,000 a bottle champagne, lounging in custom leather recliners beneath gold-gilded chandeliers. This was a space reserved for CEOs, billionaires, and international royalty, not for someone dressed in a worn leather jacket and faded jeans. Yet here stood Keanu Reeves. Across the room, Vincent Devereaux, the multi-billionaire tech mogul, had been watching him with growing irritation. Everything about Keanu, the way he carried himself, the way he commanded respect without flaunting wealth, rubbed Vincent the wrong way. Men like him dominated the world. Men like Keanu did not. Vincent adjusted his platinum cufflinks, his expression tightening. He had already secured the jet's most exclusive cabin, where our world's rarest Tibetan Mastiff, a $2.5 million breed, was being transported to his private estate in Geneva. A purchase that symbolized status, dominance, and power. And now, for reasons Vincent couldn't comprehend, the dog refused to acknowledge him. Instead, the massive beast had pressed its enormous frame against the glass of its temperature-controlled enclosure, staring intently at Keanu from across the lounge. The other travelers had begun to whisper, exchanging amused glances. Vincent's grip on his crystal tumbler of Louis XIII cognac tightened. He wasn't about to be disrespected in his own world. With slow, deliberate steps, Vincent approached Keanu, his voice polished but dripping with condescension. "You seem fascinated," Vincent said, gesturing to the Mastiff. "Impressive animal, isn't it? Bred from the finest lineage, raised with precision and care." His lips curled. "But I doubt you're familiar with that level of exclusivity." Keanu, his eyes never leaving the Mastiff, replied evenly. "He's a remarkable creature." Vincent smirked. "He's more than remarkable. He's worth more than some people's entire lives." He glanced pointedly at Keanu's scuffed boots, then back at the dog. "And let's be honest, some things in this world are meant for those who truly understand value." Keanu finally turned to face Vincent. His expression remained unreadable, but there was something in his gaze, a depth that made Vincent feel, for just a second, insignificant. "What makes you think he sees you that way?" Keanu asked, nodding toward the Mastiff. Vincent let out a sharp laugh. "Because I bought him." Keanu's eyes flicked to the enclosure. The Mastiff hadn't moved, hadn't even acknowledged Vincent's presence. But when Keanu took a single step forward, the dog let out a low, expectant whine, its tail twitching slightly. The lounge fell silent. Several private investors and celebrities, people who had spent their entire lives commanding power with their wealth, began watching with interest. Vincent's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second. He straightened his $20,000 Brioni suit jacket, his confidence shifting into something harsher, more defensive. "You know what your problem is," Vincent said, stepping even closer, voice lowering to a near whisper. "You don't understand that some things in this world are reserved for people who've earned them." He gestured dismissively at Keanu's casual attire. "You walk in here in clothes that probably cost less than the dog's grooming bill, thinking you can just—" Before he could finish, the Mastiff let out a deep, resonant bark. Not aggressive, protective. Vincent flinched. Keanu remained perfectly still. "The thing about dogs," Keanu said softly, "is that they see past the surface. They don't care about price tags or bank accounts. They recognize something deeper." He turned to face Vincent fully, and for the first time, Vincent took a small step back. The private jet's captain entered the lounge, pausing as he noticed the strange tension filling the room. But before he could speak, a flight attendant hurried over, whispering urgently to Isabelle Laurent, the owner of the jet terminal and one of the most influential figures in elite aviation. Vincent's irritation boiled over. "Listen here," he snapped, his voice rising. "I've been a VIP at this terminal for years. I own 3 private fleets. I could buy this lounge with a phone call, and you think you can just walk in here and—" But before he could finish, Isabelle turned sharply, her voice carrying across the room. "Mr. Reeves," she said with effortless authority, "it's an honor to have you here." The air shifted. Vincent's mouth snapped shut. The elite clientele who had been observing from their plush seats began to exchange glances, some leaning in, whispering. A staff member discreetly rushed forward, whispering something to Vincent. His expression darkened, his jaw clenching as if he had just been punched in the gut. Keanu remained silent. One of the other passengers finally spoke up. "Wait a minute. Is that Keanu Reeves?" A ripple of realization spread through the lounge. Vincent's smug confidence collapsed. The same man he had been patronizing, belittling, mocking for not belonging in his world was one of the most respected, wealthiest, and beloved figures on the planet. The Mastiff let out another low, gentle bark, pushing its massive frame toward Keanu as if it had been waiting for him all along. Isabelle smiled knowingly. "Mr. Reeves, would you like to proceed with the transfer of ownership?" Vincent's head snapped up. "Wait, transfer? What transfer?" Keanu finally looked at him again, and for the first time, Vincent realized the truth. He had just lost the most valuable thing in the room, not because of money, but because of who he was. And in that moment, every single person in the VIP lounge learned exactly what true worth really meant. The moment, everything changed. The private jet terminal at JFK Airport was silent. The ultra-exclusive lounge, lined with custom Italian leather seating and crystal chandeliers, was usually a place where billionaires and celebrities discussed deals worth millions without a second thought. But today, the air was thick with something else. Everyone was watching. Keanu Reeves, standing in his worn leather jacket, looked down at the massive Tibetan Mastiff leaning against his leg. The dog, valued at $2.5 million, had ignored Vincent Devereaux, the powerful tech billionaire who had purchased him, yet had chosen Keanu without hesitation. Across the lounge, Vincent stood frozen. His $20,000 suit suddenly felt suffocating. The gold Rolex on his wrist, once a symbol of power, now felt like a weight dragging him down. He had spent his entire life believing that money determined worth. But this changed everything. Vincent swallowed hard. He could feel the judgmental stares from other elite travelers. He had just spent the last hour mocking and belittling a man who, as it turned out, wasn't just an outsider. He was Keanu Reeves. A hush fell over the room as Isabelle Laurent, the owner of the terminal, stepped forward, her heels clicking against the polished marble floor. She extended a warm smile toward Keanu. "Mr. Reeves, it would be our honor to assist you with the transfer of ownership for the Mastiff." Vincent's head snapped up. His face paled. Wait, what? Transfer? Keanu finally looked at him, his expression unreadable. Vincent's chest tightened. This couldn't be happening. "That's not possible," Vincent said, forcing a laugh, but it sounded hollow. "I own that dog. I paid for him. He's mine." Isabel's sharp gaze flicked toward him. "Mr. Devereaux, a contract was signed, yes, but the buyer must be approved by our in-house experts." She gestured to the head veterinarian, who had been silently observing. "And in our professional assessment, this animal has already chosen its true owner." The Mastiff let out a low, satisfied huff, pressing even closer to Keanu. Vincent's fingers twitched. "This is insane," he muttered. "This is a business transaction, not some spiritual nonsense." He turned to Isabelle, his voice desperate, bordering on frantic. "You can't seriously be saying that a dog gets to choose where it goes." Isabelle raised an eyebrow. "Would you like to force a $2.5 million, 200-pound animal into a home it doesn't want?" A few of the other wealthy passengers chuckled softly. The shift in power was palpable. Vincent could feel it slipping through his fingers, and there was nothing he could do. Keanu remained silent for a long moment before finally speaking. "You know, Vincent," he said, his voice calm but weighted, "I don't think the real problem is who owns this dog." Vincent's jaw clenched. What is that supposed to mean? Keanu glanced around the room, taking in the watching eyes, the murmured conversations, the judgment. Then he met Vincent's gaze. "I think the real problem," Keanu continued, "is that you believe ownership is the same as worth." The room fell silent again. Vincent opened his mouth to retaliate, but no words came. Keanu crouched down, rubbing the Mastiff behind his ears. The once priceless animal closed his eyes in pure contentment. Keanu didn't own him, but in this moment it was clear they belonged together, and everyone in the room could see it. Vincent looked around, searching for someone, anyone to back him up. But the same elite travelers who had once admired his power now looked at him with something close to pity. Isabelle cleared her throat. "Mr. Reeves, we will begin processing the transfer immediately." Vincent staggered back a step. His entire life had been built on control, on dominance. But right now, he was utterly powerless. He turned to Keanu, his arrogance replaced by something else entirely. "Mr. Reeves," he said, his voice quieter now, I need to apologize, not because of who you are." He exhaled sharply. "But because of who I've been." Keanu stood up, watching him. He didn't look smug. He didn't gloat. Instead, he studied Vincent carefully, as if considering his next words. "Every day," Keanu finally said, "we have a choice about how we treat others. The money we make, the things we buy. Those are just details." He looked down at the Mastiff, then back at Vincent. "What actually matters is what we carry inside." A few of the onlookers nodded. Some even looked moved. Vincent lowered his head, his hands trembling slightly. His gold watch, once a statement, now felt like a chain. "How do you do it?" Vincent asked. Keanu tilted his head. "Do what?" Vincent gestured vaguely. "Stay grounded. Stay human, when you could have anything you want. Keanu smiled slightly. Maybe the secret is realizing that the things we really want, respect, connection, love, can't be bought. The Mastiff leaned into him again, proving his point better than words ever could. Vincent swallowed the lump in his throat. For the first time in his life, he saw the world differently. As the staff finalized the paperwork, Vincent found himself watching Keanu and the dog with new eyes. The $2.5 million Mastiff had chosen wisely, not based on status, wealth, or power, but on character. And that was something money could never buy. As Keanu turned toward the exit, the Mastiff padding happily beside him, Vincent called out one last time. Mr. Reeves. Keanu glanced over his shoulder. Vincent hesitated. Then, finally, he said, "Thank you." Not for being Keanu Reeves, but for being exactly who he was. A soft applause rippled through the lounge, not for the celebrity, but for the lesson. Because today, the world's wealthiest travelers had witnessed something priceless. The moment when a $2.5 million dog taught a billionaire the most valuable lesson of his life. And nobody in that terminal would ever forget it. True worth isn't measured by wealth, status, or material possessions. It's defined by character, kindness, and the way we treat others. In a world obsessed with appearances, it's easy to judge people based on what they wear or own, but real value lies in humility and integrity. Respect should be given freely, not based on someone's perceived importance. Moments like these remind us that the richest person isn't the one with the most money, but the one who carries the most heart. Choose kindness, recognize true value, and remember, what truly matters in life can never be bought. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe True Tapes channel, because tomorrow we have another special story for you.